So, a little bit of background about this talk. My name is Steve D. I'm a game designer based in Sydney. I've been working in the game industry for about 20 years. I teach game design as well through a thing called the Game Design Masterclass. And I have a podcast that I do every week about being a game designer, and particularly in a freelance sense. And I can post some links to the podcast. It's also on YouTube because that's where we started doing it. So there's some links there in the chat. And the first two links, first link is the podcast. The second link is the YouTube series. And then there's my website where you have some of my games. And you can find me on Twitter at TinStar Games. And that's also where we are on Facebook. This actually is an expansion and development of a thing that I did for my podcast when the self-isolation began and staying at home. We produced a series of short things about things you might be able to do while you were stuck home. So this is about making your own game, which is a really good activity to do, and it can be done by people of all ages. And we were sort of pitching that to people with kids who are at home. So if you have kids or if you know people with kids, I've designed to make this very simple. A really good introduction so that anyone can do it. And it gives you an activity that kids can do and families can do together. And like buying a set of paints or something like that, you know, it gives kids something to keep doing. It's not just going to be a one-off activity. They're going to be inspired, hopefully, and just want to keep making games. So the topic for today is called the how and why to make your first board game. I'm going to start with the why, to try and convince you that it's a good idea, so that once we get to the how, you're all paying excellent attention. So why make your own board game? Well, the answer is it's just a really good creative activity that engages your mind in a really unique way. If you think back to when you were at school, you would have done writing stories, you would have done modeling with clay probably, you could have played with Play-Doh, you would have drawn pictures and learned how to paint, and all these things are done to engage you in creative pursuits and hopefully unlock some potential and love and passion for these things. And we tend to put that aside, but like everything in our life, it's really good to just engage in these creative pursuits as a way of unlocking that potential in ourselves and exploring that side of ourselves. We kind of skip over games, but games are a really important art form. And we're actually natural game players. Games are part of our life from when we're very young, but also right up to now. You know, as soon as we started isolating, a lot of games popped up and puzzles all over Facebook. We play games on our phones. We play board games are now more popular than ever. Bridge is the world's most popular pastime. We're game players as people. Computer games is the biggest industry in the world. Humans are natural game players, and we have been for all eternity. It's not just part of our culture and our society, it's part of who we are as people, that we want to play games. And we played lots of games when we were kids, and we were natural game players. We always looked for ways to make things fun. And so gaming is a really important part of humanity and who we are in our culture and our society. And the other thing about learning to make games is you'll understand the art form around you better. So just as you learned to paint and to write so that you would learn to understand fiction better and understand art better, if you understand how to make a game, you'll be better at playing games and understanding what games do and why you like the games you do and what makes a game good. And this all will make you a richer experience for you to play games. So it's a really good way to learn about the things that matter in your life, because you all play games at some point. And we also have natural gaming design instincts. Game design seems difficult. It seems like very often that, like a lot of things, games just appear from some magical cloud where some brilliant person makes them. But we actually all have natural instincts. Just like with any art, we have natural creative instincts in this area. And you can tell this because you used to change games when you were kids when they weren't any fun. If you played Tiggy or Chase or whatever you call it, or tag with someone who was just much faster than people, you stopped playing with that person because you realized it wasn't a good game. There was no chance of tagging them. You also naturally changed the rules. If there was someone who was really good, if you tagged them, they quickly tagged you back, you would say something like no tag backs, because that wasn't fun. And you were quickly making these changes in your head because you have instincts about what makes a game fun. And if you're a parent with kids, you've also come across this where you've given people advantages and you've changed the rules so that things are more fun for everyone. And that instinct in game design is part of all of us, and you've got it. You've also done it in more complicated games. And this is why house rules are so common, because everyone has instincts about what makes things better for the people around them at that point. I'm going to keep coming back to Monopoly. It's not a great, well-designed game, but it's a game that everyone knows. And it's a game that has tons of house rules. Because it's not well-designed, most of those house rules exist to make the game more fun. For example, the free parking rule, where people put their money there and then you get to pick it up. That's a sort of random thing that allows people to catch up. We would call it catch-up mechanic. And that's there because when you'll start losing Monopoly, it's really boring. So that's something that has been implemented. Someone's commented that, yes, some people change games so that they win. And yes, that is an instinct that we can have to play selfishly as well. But you'll often realize that and you'll resent those people and you go, okay, that person isn't playing in a way that makes games fun. I can recognize that is against good gameplay. And that is an instinct that you have, that you can recognize that. So you've got an instinct about what makes a game good as opposed to what makes somebody win. And that's something that you can explore as a game designer. So yeah, there's a lot of this going along. Game design is a complex thing, though. It is a science and an art, and there is a lot to learn, like any kind of craft. But we're going to start very simple. And the nice thing about game design is that it is inherently iterative. It's something that's always done where you build on things that already exist. And in that way, it's a lot more like cooking than any of the other art forms. Cooking is a really good metaphor because it's something that is done by just looking at what recipes and things are already out there and changing them slightly. Also, it's a good example because cooking is all about recipes more than ingredients. Like, very rarely do we learn about a new ingredient. Sometimes you'll see a show like, oh, here's something you might never have heard of. You've never cooked with bok choy before or something because it's from a different culture to you, or it's something that you just never taught because you grew up with just roast and veg or something. And so the cookbook will teach you about what this thing is, what flavors it has, and how it works. But mostly what cookbooks and cooking shows are all about is ingredients. Taking things that you already know basically how to cook. You know how to cook a steak, you know how to cook onions and tomato or something, you know how to cook pasta basically, and just telling you their recipe. And when you cook, you're actually making your own recipe a lot of the time because you don't always follow things exactly. Like, you run out of basil today, so you add a bit more oregano. You're making a bolognese, it's the same sort of things. You know how to cook tomato and onion and sauce, and you know how to cook pasta. So the ingredients haven't changed, but there's a little bit of a different recipe. And game design is all about that. Almost always, ingredients never change. Very, very rarely there are new ingredients. But what happens is everything is just a different combination of a recipe. And in the same way that, you know, bolognese is all about the same. Your first games are probably not going to be an amazing new recipe that is going to go on the table at a restaurant. But it is true that the way you cook bolognese can become your home speciality. And your version of it will be slightly different to the one that someone else makes when you bring it to the table. And the other great thing about this metaphor is that I want you to think about, sorry, a plane's about to fly over my head because I live under a flight zone. So I'll just stop for a second. You're not trying to be a chef. You're not trying to present something in a restaurant. You're trying to make something that you can put on a table and serve to your friends and family. So that's another reason that cooking is a great metaphor. Don't try to make a brand new dish that, you know, will set the world on fire. Try to make something nourishing and delicious that your friends can sit down and play, and experiment like you would in the kitchen by changing things. Now, also, we're going to start with a recipe, or rather a thing that you know very well, and then we're going to change it slightly to learn how to experiment and build. So there's basically, what I want you to do if you are doing this process is go and get a game you know. Now I'm going to keep coming back to things like Monopoly and and whatever kind of card games you like as a kid, like Hearts or Old Maid or things like that. Go to your cupboard, get out any game that you like, any game that you enjoy, that you want to play around with. It can also be a game that you don't enjoy, but just grab something as your starting model. I'm sure you have a game somewhere in your house, even if it's just a pack of cards or an old version of Monopoly. You get it out, and you're going to work by just changing it slightly. And by learning that first experimentation, you can teach yourself the art of being a game designer. There are basically three things that you can do when you're changing a game to change how it works. And the first thing you can do is change the theme or the setting. So this is, the the story that is being told by the game. So if we go like, obviously Uno doesn't have much of a story, but it can have one put on it. There are things like Frozen Uno and Disney Uno and Winnie the Pooh Uno. Not much of a story, but it adds a little bit of theme. Monopoly, of course, has a theme. It's quite strong. You're buying and selling property, often in parts of London or in Atlantic City in America, or if you've got one of the Australian sets. But there's also, you've probably seen very much reskins of these things. For example, there's a Star Wars Monopoly and a Star Trek Monopoly. And the Star Wars Monopoly, you're not buying property, you're buying space stations that you put in sectors. And you're either, the rebels or the empire. And you don't pay in dollars, you pay in galactic credits, and you don't go to community chest, you get a gift from the Force or something. So these are small cosmetic changes, but they actually can have quite a dramatic effect, because if you just change a few things like this, you can change a lot of what the meaning of the game is. We know that going to jail is bad because it is called going to jail. That communicates something about what's going on as the experience. So by simply changing these elements, so you can look at Monopoly and feel free to, you're going to, for all of this, you're going to get out your papers and your pens and your crayons and your scissors and glue and stickers, and feel free to manipulate and mutilate your old games. Like actually just stick stickers on the Monopoly board and change what all the properties are called. And you can change them into anything you might like. You might change them into one of the examples of Monopoly also changes them into fair rides at a fair. So there's like the Ferris wheel and the roller coaster. Little things like that can just change the mood dramatically, but they could also be great changes. It could be space stations, it could be sectors in space, it could be fantasy lands, it could be magical portals that you're trying to control, or gaps in the universe that lead to other dimensions. It could be graveyards in a graveyard, gravestones in a graveyard that you're trying to control for mystical purposes, perhaps to summon spirits or to drain the souls of the people who live there or something. All of these things are possible, and you can just get stickers and stick them on and change the name, and you'll actually find that if you change the feel, it will actually change the game dramatically. You will find, for example, if you make some person be Darth Vader and some person be Luke Skywalker and someone else be Han Solo, even if you're all playing competitively, you're going to want to attack Darth Vader more than you want to attack Han Solo, because you just have that instinctive insert in your brain about who is the one that you should be attacking. So you can change games dramatically by just changing who you are, who you represent, and what you do in the game. And it's a very easy change to make, and it makes it something very fun. You just go, someone comes over and say, oh, let's play Monopoly. Yeah, let's play my Monopoly set where I've renamed everything about, where we all went to school or something like that. That will change the game dramatically. Or the favorite book. They're all Harry Potter places now. You can do that yourself. You don't have to go out and buy the version of Harry Potter Monopoly. So that's changing the theme, that's called. The next step is changing the rules. And again, we've all done this. This is why the free parking rule exists, because there are things that we've all just gone, oh, that's a bit dumb, we'll change that. Some people like to treat the rules as coming down from God, and there's often really good reasons why rules exist that aren't always obvious. And you shouldn't just naturally go that every rule is broken. But to learn how to be a game designer, you experiment by changing things. So the first thing you want to do is just look through a few rules and just think about what would happen if that rule changed. Just the tiniest bit. What happens if you get $1,000 for passing go in Monopoly instead of 200? Play it, find out. What happens if you get no dollars for passing go when you're playing Monopoly? Now everything has to come from rent that you catch with other people. There's no amount of money coming in. Maybe, how does that speed the game up? How does it change the game? How does it change the feel of the game now that you can't get money just from a salary, right? That's a very small change to make. You can also make changes like, what if, for example, instead of rolling 2 dice, what if you roll 3 dice? That makes you move further. What if you roll 3 dice and pick the 2 you want, so you have more control about where you land? What if you don't go to jail anymore? We just get rid of that. What if people can have multiple turns more frequently? There are easy, small changes that you can make to rules. You can start with cards in your hand. What if everyone just gets dealt a whole bunch of chance cards so they can move a lot easier instead of having to land on those spaces? You can start with more money, less money. All sorts of things that you can do to just change the rules very simply. With Uno, you might start with more cards. With fewer cards, you might have some cards be drafted so that you can predict what people are going to have in their hands and change what you're going to have. So it's very easy to just go, well, what about this? What if we change this? What if we had to play 2 cards a turn instead of 1? What if, this card did this card did that. You can just go through like a laundry list and find a few rules and just change one or two of them and see what happens. And that can change the game dramatically. It might be a disaster. It might blow up in your face. But that we once again come back to the cooking metaphor in that you're going to have a good story out of it anyway. You're going to have that time that you put, you put salt in the tea by accident, it was horrible. Or that time you decided to put, something strange in your bolognese and it was weird, but everyone also thought it was kind of interesting. And that's part of the experience. And then you'll learn, well, maybe there wasn't the right thing to put in, but now we know, and now we know what that rule does in the game, and we understand it a bit better. We can figure out, well, what if we change something else? What if we change it in a different way? And so playing around with rules and finding out what happens is a huge part of game design. Most of, as I say, it's an iterative process. And when we're building games, we come up with an idea, we try it, and then we tweak it. We try it, we tweak it, we try it, we tweak it. So this is a huge part of the process, and it just is a fun experience. You just change a rule and see what happens. So pick your favorite game and just change one or two rules. That's the second one, changing the rules. The third part is changing the bits. So games really are built out of a theme, rules, and bits. So that's the things you actually play with. A board, a card, cards, dice, pieces, things that represent people, miniature figures, little houses. All those kind of things are the bits that make the game. And again, you can change those things. And again, it seems small. Like if you just change, for example, a board to a series of cards that you deal out, that doesn't feel like a bit of a change. But what if you could randomly put those cards in different places? That would actually change the rules and change how things feel. And just like theme, changing what elements you use actually does change how it feels to move things around. Try playing Monopoly, for example, with instead of using the paper money, use poker chips. They feel a bit more solid and people are less keen to spend them as a result because they feel more important. So people will buy property less often and they'll feel more worried as their pile goes down because it feels a bit more solid. You could also think of something more abstract. Like what if you replaced poker chips with chess pieces and you had some sort of agreed value to them, but now instead of paying $500, you're paying your queen. That's going to change the psychological feeling of that a lot more because it doesn't feel like a piece of paper. It feels like, well, this is my queen. This is something important. Well, and that might model something in the setting. Once again, we come back to, does that change the theme? Does that change the rules? Is it perhaps our ancient heirlooms that we have to sell off to get into the property market? So you can begin to see how these things are connected, but changing the bits is a really fun way again. And again, we've also done this. Like I'm sure a lot of people have had a chess set where the bishop's gone missing, so we replace it with a candlestick or something like that. Or, we lost the pieces, so everyone just gets a bit of Lego out of a box, and that's who you are. Another plane coming, I'm sorry. So we've all got experience with playing with different bits, and it can change the game dramatically. You find you might actually have a more jolly experience. For example, if instead of moving the little horse around on Monopoly, you've got a little Lego man with a big smile on his face. That can just make things a bit more fun, a bit more freewheeling. So changing bits, changing rules, changing theme, and what you'll discover quickly is that these things feed into each other, as we've already said. If you've got little space Lego guys, you might go, well, okay, this isn't about property, this is about space stations. And then you go, well, if they are space stations, why are they in a square? Maybe we can move anywhere. And now we've moved from changing the bits to changing the theme to changing the rules. You start changing the rules, you start changing the bits. For example, why not use cards instead of dice to move around in Monopoly? That way you've got the numbers 1 to 12. You already know which numbers are going to come up. So then we go, okay, that's less random. So that's changed the rules. By making it less random, we realize we need cards instead of dice. So we put the cards in. And so rules change bits, and then bits will change the theme, because if we know that we're not moving randomly, we also, well, why can we program how we move? Maybe we've got some sort of control over that. Each of these things feeds into the other, and that is the natural art of game design. And I think you'll find if you just try a few of these things, you'll get excited by it, and you'll make something simple but fun and different. So I hope that's something that you feel that you can do now, and go home and grab a game and get your pens and paper out and make something new and exciting, and then share it with the rest of us, because we'd love to see the exciting new versions of games that you can build. That's pretty much all. Zoe's asking if you don't have any games at home. Now, that can happen these days. I mean, there was a time when every house had a copy of Monopoly, but these days we've moved out. We live in smaller houses. If you want to, one thing you can do is go out. Like if you if you do go out to the shops, most shops will sell in a supermarket a pack of cards, and they'll sell a cheap game, in the toy section. Pick up Monopoly, pick up Payday, pick up something for kids, pick up Scrabble. You can get online and order these kind of things. They're often like $10 or something. Charity shops also overflowing with these things because their kids grow up, they get rid of them. If you want to do this online without any kind of tools, that's going to be more difficult because you have to learn how to manipulate graphic elements. It's more, but there are ways to do that. There's a program I use called Tabletop Simulator. Now it does cost money, and you have to get it through a Steam account, but it basically simulates a 3D table that you can add objects to. So you can go in there, your friends can log in, you can all be sitting around a table, you can get a pack of cards or two and go, right, we're going to play hearts, but this time we're going to add more powers to the jacks. So that's another way that you can get in and get this experience. Obviously, you can't get your friends in front of a table at this point, but if you've got anyone else in your house with you, you can, and you can use cameras as well. And a lot of people are playing games over video. So you can use something like Zoom to set up a board and stuff like that. Yes, Mahesh says, of course, you don't even need to have a game to start with. You've got cardboard, pieces of paper, pens. You can just make up whatever you need. Grab some paper out of a book. 2 pieces of A4 cardboard can be strapped together to make a nice board, but an A4 board, and sometimes the most fun things is going, well, what if we, what could we improvise? What if we didn't have a board? Playing categories with pen and paper. There's a lot of old parlor games that just need pen and paper and things like that. And that's a great way to start. Like, let's take an old parlor game and change the mechanics. Let's play Pictionary using the dictionary. And then you go, well, what if we used a different book? What if we used, Harry Potter as our reference book, or the Harry Potter dictionary or something like that? There's a lot of things around your house that you can use to play games. And we are often, it's in our instinct to just grab things and make random games out of them. You've probably, seen something sitting on the ground and decided to throw it into the bin with a basketball shot because you've gone into, oh, here's a game, I'll try to get it in one shot. That kind of improvisation can happen anywhere, and you could then go, right, we're going to play some basketball here. There's a bin. Now we're playing it for real. Obviously, you might smash a few windows, but the spirit of that kind of grabbing what you've got and changing the rules is a great way to just to have a fun activity with what you've got around you. So are there any other questions about that? The next step, as always, is just have a go. Just get over the idea that you have to know what you're doing, and just take something, rip it, change it, draw on it, change a few rules, and see what happens. And that's all you need to do to become a game designer. And then you just start building your own thing and sharing it with other people. And sooner or later, you might stumble on something that you don't think anyone else has made, and then you can share it. Thank you very much, Mahesh. I think it's great to do with kids. Okay, Jacob is asking, can you think of other good ways to implement this sort of experimental approach to playing with game design with video games? Video games, yes, it is harder to hack them because the code is all invisible. There are some ways you can do with it. Like someone says, like you can try to do a thing where you don't lose any health, where you never jump, where you never kill anyone. There's all these sort of things that people can put on as like, let's try and see what happens if we do this. Sandbox type games, you can also kind of invent games in, like, what happens, what is the highest we can build a train track before the train just won't go upwards anymore, things like that. And that's, basically creating a game inside the sandbox element. So that's something you can do. But hacking computer games in general is trickier. You have to kind of, as you say, figure out ways to add rules, basically. You can't take away rules very easily. So you look for games that have the least amount of rules, like sandboxes, and go, right, let's add some rules of our own. And let's see if we can change the theme. Minecraft is a good example, yes, of somewhere. And you can use elements of Minecraft to make, you could take things that aren't normally because they're just bricks, you can take like brown bricks and build something that looks like a fearsome Dracula's castle or something. You've changed the theme from living in the forest to, ooh, haunted house. But you can also download skins into Minecraft. So you can change what blocks look like and what people look like. So that allows you to build things. There's actually a lot of tools like this for kids. Roblox is another great example, ROBLOX, which just gives you a kind of a sandbox environment, but with tools to go, this is a game element. This is something that you can interact with like it's in a game. It does this, and it can be an enemy. It can be things for that. All right, that's my time. Does anyone have any last questions before I finish? Links will be around there. Find me online. Any questions you have, I'm always happy to help people get into the game design industry and the hobby. And we will be doing play testing, hopefully again, when we're all back, being able to meet face to face. Thanks, Zoe. Thanks, guys.